probability of somebody having the age of 40, right? So that's the meaning of the word probability. So that's a very defined, well-defined word. There is no need for confusion for that word. Confusions arise in these other words. What is possibility and what is actuality?
What is reality?
So we are saying in quantum physics only, this distinction is clearly necessary because the mathematics is giving us objects which simultaneously can be in many different places. That's why we call it a wave, right? But what kind of wave is it? Is it everywhere like a water wave or a sound wave? It is everywhere, no? Sound wave?
Yes.
Everybody in the same distance sitting from me is hearing me. Sound wave is in many places at the same time. So are these waves of potentiality, these objects, quantum objects, are they everywhere at the same time like a sound wave is? No. That's the first thing. No, they are not. Because if you put Geiger counter, all of the Geiger counters are not ticking, even if they are in the same distance from the source. They are not ticking, only one ticks. That's why the first thing we understand about them, that they are very special kind of waves. And we call them waves of possibility. They are only possible. They are only possible objects. They have possible position. Okay?
Can you define the reality and the actuality and how this is connected to consciousness?
We'll come to that. Please stop. Don't go to that question yet. Let everybody understand that possibility means that all these different positions are possibilities to happen, not actualities yet.
Why do we call it a wave actually? It's not real wave.
We are forced to call them something because the mathematics is telling us that there is indeed, and there is something already there. This is the thing. We have to define an entity which needed to enter there because there is this characteristic that is entering is called the wave characteristic. It is, mathematics is telling us this wave characteristic, and if we use the mathematics, we can calculate these probabilities correctly. What position will show up, in how many experiments. I can calculate it correctly by these dynamics that my mathematics have generated for the movement of the wave.
So actually it is an abstract concept. It's not a real, it's not a wave. So it's an abstraction actually. I mean, it's a bit confusing that.
So what is reality? No, this is the problem. Mathematics is telling us that if we take the mathematical results seriously, I actually can calculate, if I do a large number of experiments, the result of the experiment. The experiment will give me that particular position with a given probability that I can actually measure. The theory will calculate a probability from the theory. The two matches. And that's why we say, the theory is accurate. Theory is verifiable experimental if I do many experiments, right? So you cannot ignore the language the theory imposes upon us. Theory imposes the language that waves are waves of potentiality, waves of possibility. They are not actual waves in space and time because otherwise all the Geiger counters would tick all at the same time. They don't. One of them ticks. Is that meaningless? Is that just pure chance? No, it's not pure chance because we can calculate the chance, the probability without mathematics. See the problem? Therefore, we must take the mathematical description seriously. We must assume that yes, there is a world of potentiality before actuality. Potentiality before actuality. See that?
And the difference between reality and actuality.
So what is reality? So now we are faced with the question, okay, what is reality? Is reality the actuality or reality the potentiality?
Yes,
what is reality?
Can you define reality and can you define actuality?
Well, let's do it properly. So again, let me take his thought first. So in India, let me answer this question. It will really, it's a very good question. What is reality, to ask it at this time? So again, Indian philosophers were very good at this kind of thing. There are two kinds of philosophers. is it that creation occurs because we observed it? There are two things here. We are observing in Sanskrit drishti, and there is actuality, srishti. So there are two ways of looking at it. We observe, therefore reality. Another way of looking at it is the opposite. Reality is already there, then observation. So which one is correct? This is the debate we have to penetrate. This is the debate. The debate is the observation that is manifesting reality, or should we call this potentiality the reality? And then the observation is creating something that is not reality. See the thing, we are back to the mystical question. We're back to mysticism. If we say domain of potentiality is the reality, then we have discovered that oneness is the reality. And then when we are observing, we have created these objects, which we usually call reality, but now we are calling it actuality, very carefully, very cleverly. We're calling it manifest actuality. We're not calling it reality, because we want to leave this question unanswered as of yet. What is reality? It could be this one or it could be that one. Let's see which one it is. Let's not be impatient, okay? So we are not sure yet what is the real reality. But we have given names to this. Mathematics is giving us predictions of waves which can have different facets all at the same time. We call it a wave of possibility. And when we measure, they become particles of actuality. Right? This is very, very clear now. But what is reality, we leave it uncertain. And we say that, okay, this question of what does it, the agent, we leave that unsettled also. We go through a few other things before we do that. Okay, but the description that the mathematics is giving us is completely clear, right?
Yes.
Many faceted waves. And when we measure, we have a one-faceted object that we call particle. Particles have a definite position, waves have many positions, all at the same time. Okay? Now, so scientists start to debate between themselves, and many people saw things very differently. One particular group, they felt that, okay, anytime we have a change from one description to another description, the change requires a force field. That is the way Newton said, every scientist knows that the change can come about only because of a force field. Right? Remember Newton's second law? A force is needed to make a change. So these people, all great scientists, avant-garde, they said a new force is needed. This cannot be a material force. And this was established by a mathematician in quantum physics. This is very important. This mathematician named John von Neumann, can you hear me all? I don't have to get up and write the name. I'll write his name later. Neumann, von Neumann. He showed that material forces just cannot do this. They cannot change potentiality to actuality. If you use material forces, potentiality will change into potentiality only. One potentiality will move into another potentiality, but not producing actuality that experiment do to these objects. Whenever we measure experiments or observe, then potentiality changes into actuality. All kinds of potentialities were available. Now, only one facet of that is available, has been the actualized. This transition, which physicists call collapse because of their wrong theory initially, this transition cannot happen because of a material force. So this is the first time in science that somebody seriously proposed that there really are whisper now, because this is very, very disturbing. There really are non-material interactions getting into physics. There's no way of denying it. And then there was a guy, English physicist named David Bohm. He actually did an approximate mathematics, but very close to the real mathematics, and proved mathematically, hey, there really is. Mathematics proves that there is such a force. So there is no question that there is non-material forces. And what should you call them? Whispers, in different scientific circles. The mainstream still not very receptive to these whispers. Has it changed because of that experiment I told you in the first session? No. These materialists still hang on to their beliefs. But because of David Bohm's mathematics, because of this strong argument that one thing we cannot deny, whenever we measure, potentiality does change into actuality. And it is a fact that material forces cannot do it. Therefore, logic says irrefutably, this is undeniable logic, right? That there is a non-material something, whether to call it force, that remains to be seen, or is there any other way of looking at it? That's what we have to decipher. Yes, please.
When we talk about this question of reality, this word reality, one thought which I am trying to debate in my mind about is, can we say that reality is an organized pattern? It could be an organized pattern within the domain of actuality or within the domain of potentiality. And that is why when we say organized pattern, it is a creation of an observer.
Okay, good point, right? If a mathematical pattern is not an organized pattern, what is? So many people say since these patterns that we call waves of potentiality, they are the result of mathematics, who can deny reality, the word reality, to an organized pattern? That's very good way of putting it. So many of us, many scientists say that, look, you cannot deny reality to these things. But then we ask, but what are those things then? The particles, the actualized stuff. Should we call them unreal? What are they? You see the problem? And then we get into value judgment. What is realer? Maybe that's more real than this one. Okay? So there are problems here. If we are cautious, we are going to be damned. We'll discover all these various things that ancient people were also bothered by, that mystics worried and worried and worried. There's a lot of books about this, you know. The whole knowledge is not expressed in one-liners. Shankara did what salespeople do it all the time today. They just find a one-liner. Shankara did that. Ekam wonderful one-liner. But it doesn't solve the confusion because of this kind of question.
Sir, and this question actually has initiated a talk about symmetry, asymmetry, chaos, all such theories too. Whatever our gentleman previously who spoke, he gave a reality and the perspective of a reality, of the reality, perspective of the reality. And to that, symmetry, asymmetry, and chaos theories, they are also interwoven. I wanted to make note of it.
Yeah, I mean the point is that there are so many ways of looking at things. Are these ever resolvable? Can we ever resolve this thing? Very legitimate question. Okay, so again, let's go easy and see how physicists progressed in thinking gradually. So the first thing that came, and this is an important thing, so let me write down the name of this person. Very, very important name. The weird name is what the and the second one now that I'm talking about, I'm talking a name called Heisenberg. Warner. My handwriting is terrible, so you have to hear me. Warner Heisenberg. So what Heisenberg said is very interesting. He said that look at, first when we did many experiments and quantum physics calculate these probabilities that we can measure if we do many experiments, and therefore the theory is authentified. There is no doubt that the theory is correct. Let's analyze what is actually happening. So before we do a single measurement, we have a knowledge simply by looking at the mathematics, a prediction. But what is the prediction? Prediction is probability. When you know probability, like we say that there is 25% probability that the audience here is below the age of 40. Right? We have some knowledge, but certainly it's a vague knowledge, just percentage. We cannot really say that 25% we get a count, that it will be that count or deviate by 1 or 2, we cannot say that, right? It's a prediction, good prediction, but within a certain error. And then we said, but after we measure, then you know exactly where the object is. So knowledge has changed from vague knowledge to accurate knowledge. So he said that the measurement is a change in our knowledge about the object. Listen to this carefully. Measurement is change in our knowledge. So here we are talking about objects. All of a sudden something else enters the picture. Us, our knowledge. So Heisenberg made the first breakthrough that quantum physics is not only talking about objects, it's also talking about us. Objects and us are mixed up. So again, whispers in physics circle. That's all can be done because the prejudice is still very strong that objects are real. The first chink in the reality of objects is already there because quantum physics says objects are waves of possibility before they become actual. Right? Already a chink. Possibility is a vague thing. Possibility is not as real as this. Possibility is not solid. Possibility is very vague. You see, before quantum physics, if anybody says, like Shankara, reality comes from fullness, which is vague concept, or especially the Buddhists, they squarely say reality comes from nothingness. And that's really objectionable. Nothing can come from nothing, people say. Nothing can come from nothing. And therefore we reject this Shunyavada. Buddha is absolutely wrong. Right? No, wrong. Quantum physics is saying, well, these things are not things. Things that we thought are things, they are really no things, they are possibilities. Before we made them things by measuring them. Who can deny that? This is true. Yes. Before measuring, what is this? Close your eyes. What do you see? Do you see a marker? Where is the marker? It's our assumption. Isn't it an assumption? We assume. Can you verify? No, because to verify you have to open your eyes. Well, you can say, I'm touching it. All right, imagine something that is suspended here. I don't have to touch it. Where does it go? Imagine the moon. Is the moon there when nobody is looking at it? Nobody is measuring it? The quantum physicist, this is like when I first went into America. This is like in the 60s. A paper was written which caused a huge whisper. Somebody actually dared to write a paper titled, "Is the moon there when we are not looking at it?" And he said, "Moon is not there." He was so daring, he said, "Moon is not there." It isn't, according to quantum physics, a wave of potentiality. Why do you think it is there? Because we are habituated to think that it is there. When there is no measurement, there is no actuality. Of course, the potentiality for the moon is so limited that whenever we see it almost at the same place. And this is what is causing an illusion. This is what is causing what I call a camouflage. It appears, because it always appears at the same place. You're sitting in a chair, you close your eyes, you open your eyes, so I'm sitting at the same place. We all see you sitting at the same place, so we think. But in reality, today, we can make a laser instrument and measure where you were sitting a moment ago and then where you are found now. In between, nobody has looked. You know what? Your center of mass does change. Little tiny bit. So these things have established beyond any reasonable doubt that the quantum description is the correct one. Things do become what we call potentiality. They are not actualized until we see them, until there is a change in our knowledge. Why is that important? Because what is seeing? Seeing involves also the brain. Without the brain, there is no quantum measurement. And that's how we become involved. There is something in the brain that we have to know, that we have to ask. This is the secret. This is how we discovered that, oh, it's our consciousness. Yes, please.
Does this not, sir, does this not objectivity or a scientific objectivity which says measurement is change in our knowledge, spawn the famous uncertainty principle, and this is actually the core bed of uncertainty principle?
This is connected with the uncertainty principle, yes.
For that example, when I studied in my college physics, I was told that beautiful example by my teacher, which certainly will be useful, I think. I shall narrate it within 30 seconds. From Bangalore, Pyramid Valley International's conference hall in which Dr. Amit Goswami is giving a lecture. From the entry point of Bangalore until this hall, the distance is 40.1 kilometers, suppose. Then, and it has taken 1 hour and 5 minutes for me to travel in a vehicle. And if I measure from here until the entry point of Bangalore, then the distance will not be, the time will not be 1 hour and 5 minutes. It could be 1 hour, 5 minutes and 35 seconds. Or 1 hour, 4 minutes and 40 seconds. So there is a clear gap of an accurate time-space relativity there. That change or gap is well within the bed core of uncertainty principle. Is that right, sir?
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is connected to uncertainty, but that's the technical description of it, and staying away from too much technical. Okay. After all, this is suppose that we are non-scientist audience, but I'm quite aware that many of you have the training, and so could be sophisticated. But let's not do it because it's not necessary. The sophistication is not necessary. What you are understanding is already enough to understand reality, because you are interested only in the philosophical question. which is the concern that we have. What is reality? So that we can live real and not get too attached to the unreal. So we really are interested in discerning what is reality.
So
Okay.
to avoid confusion, can you have one example throughout the period? One example, event or situation or play or anything. So then best everybody not have much.
Actually, the example that you have given in
Every time put same example, then the confusion easily be.
Well, let's share his example.
yeah. So I want to hear your clarification on the example given in again the same movie that we have watched, the Red Indians example. So the Red Indians did not imagine that there were ships. They were never seen ships in their life. So when they saw waves on the ocean, they tried to imagine what causing these waves. And it's only when they never imagined there were ships. Now, can we relate that to Heisenberg? That only when they could force imagination thinking, okay, there may be ships. Only then they could see the ships. They couldn't see the ships because they never thought that there are such.
Well,
is that right?
whatever examples you give, the examples will usually come from our everyday experiences. And the confusion really does not go away by just finding examples. But still, we can try any examples you give. Anything you give will have different facets, right? And then measurement will take away these different facets and you have the actuality in your hand. The more abstract you can make this, the better for you. You just realize that any experience, for example, how we think, how does thinking comes to us? Realize that we will always have potentialities of many thoughts that are just lurking around, and then a particular thought comes. Isn't that true? Same thing is true of every bit of our experience. All experiences come from potentialities. This is why we say that, look, we are not creating thoughts like materialists think that we are. Just think of thoughts for a second. Materialists think that thought is nothing but the excitement of a particular brain circuit, which is thought. We're just remembering a memory, right? But notice this, if this were true, then how could we remember a particular memory? Think of it for a second. Anybody can remember a particular memory, correct? You are trying to remember, okay, 5 days ago my son did this, and you remember it immediately. Now think of brain as a computer, and you have this record somewhere in the brain, indeed, that your son did this thing that you are remembering now. Think of it as a memory retrieval problem. In your computer, you have an information about what your son did 5 days ago, right? And you are trying to retrieve it. How do you do it? You do it because you know how to retrieve it, what button to push. You know that, and that's how your son's picture comes up, and there he is doing that thing that you remember. But how are you doing it with your brain? What are you pushing? Are you pushing a spot in the brain? How do you know what to push? We don't know. We just assume that somehow the material description must be correct. But it cannot be. Quantum description will be what? The brain state, the possibility. Okay? And this non-material force, or whatever, we are trying to define it better and better. This non-material force is something. It cannot be detached from us. This is what we are trying to get at. It cannot be away from us, because if it were, again the retrieval problem. This non-material force must be connected to us, because we can retrieve, right? We can retrieve such memories so effortlessly. I just pay attention and the memory comes. Retrieval is so easy. So listen to the quantum description. How we are getting that. Okay. Let's do this.
Amit, are you talking about
I need the computer also, because I want you to go through this argument where no, this too involved, it's all too muddled up. That's why I need to sit there. Otherwise it will take you forever. S-C-I-R-E, scire, which means to know. So when Heisenberg said that it's a change in our knowledge, what's the vehicle through which we gather knowledge? That is the vehicle we call consciousness, isn't it? Etymologically, that's what we call consciousness. So at least the etymological origin is captured already by Heisenberg's assertion. It's a good way of thinking, to begin the thinking. Okay? Ah, very clever. Okay, and now I can sit in comfort like a king.
Shift you here.
The computer will be shifted here.
Yeah, I'll shift the computer.
All right.
Got it?
And I'm really feeling better.
Yes. And you can sit comfortably.
Okay.
Triangle, hold.
And then you will put me a footstool and I was joking. This will require a little magic.
Okay. So all that you need is just climb up and then you can try it.
Okay, this is as good as it can be. Great, thank you. Okay, so change in our knowledge. The next step took place with von Neumann, again that man who discovered that non-material agency is necessary. So here's the thing. Von Neumann recognized one aspect of the experiment that people did not recognize before. You have to recognize the difficulty of all this, just as the difficulty of any person. You don't have to be scientist. The difficulty of thinking arises because you get used to ways of thinking from the culture. We call these apparatuses like Geiger counter, we call them measurement apparatus. Why do we call them measurement apparatus? Because we think that they are the ones that measure, right? Right? Because otherwise, why should we call them measurement apparatus? But the question is, do they measure? You put a Geiger counter in there, and will it measure? What did we decide? We decided that if Geiger counters measure, then all the Geiger counters should go tick, tick, tick. Right? We decided that, no? In potentiality, all the Geiger counters do go tick, 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 because all the Geiger counters are what? They are also potentiality. They are made of potentiality. If something is made of potentiality, what else can it be? So really, what is happening is that there is electrons everywhere in the room, there is Geiger counters everywhere in the room, and the fact is the Geiger counters are also going tick, tick, tick everywhere in the room, except that all happening in potentiality. Potentially, electrons interact with Geiger counters and they are all big potentiality, but no actual tick. These ticks are also possible ticks. Nobody is here. Remember ancient adage from Bishop Berkeley in 18th century, some of you do, if a tree is there in the forest and it falls, but nobody there to hear the sound of the tree falling, is there a sound or not? If nobody is there to hear it, is there a sound or not?
No.
Good. You are already a quantum aficionado. So quantum physics is saying not only there isn't a sound, there isn't even a tree.
Yes.
There is no falling, no tree, no sound, all of this happening in potentiality. If you can call it happening, nothing is actually happening. Everything is potentiality. So Deepak Chopra, who is one of the leaders of the New Age, he says, the world is full of potentiality. We can choose anything we like. So that's the description we are getting at. We choose reality out of potentiality. But we have to get to it step by step. There is possibility of jnana here. If we do it too hurriedly, then what happens is that we get the intellectual part of it. We don't get the part where the intellect and our being totally cooperate. If we get it in the way that intellect and the being is cooperating totally in sync, then we get what is called wisdom. Otherwise it will be just knowledge. And that knowledge is easily had. We create our own reality. It's a piece of knowledge that was created in America in the 70s. Some people got it, some people didn't, created a lot of mischief, a lot of misconception. That's what happened. But if you discover it properly, you will not have those misconceptions automatically. So don't be in any rush. We have time. We are going probably another hour. You don't mind, Indians eat late lunch. You all had good idlis at breakfast, right? Can you handle it? Yes. Okay. So let's go easy and slow. Next step came when, as I was saying, Paul Newman was the first one to realize that it's not the Geiger counter that measures, because the Geiger counter is also potentiality. Potential measurement is already taking place. Potential measurement, but nothing actual. Actual has to happen with what Heisenberg says, change in our knowledge. A human observer has to be there. How do we know for sure? Because if an observer is there, then there will be a tick which will be hard. And that hearing is everything. That's a sensory knowledge that has done something irreversible. Never again will be able to see that, will be able to say that there was only potentiality. Never again. Because an observer has heard a tick, that is an irreversible event that took place in the observer's consciousness. Undeniably, the potentiality changed into actuality. Undeniably. The observer would say, I heard it. I heard it, and that's it. That's it. So, if immediately in the wisdom that followed from it, this is again a little bit confused, but still, this wisdom has been there also from the time immemorial. This wisdom is called dualism. Okay, something non-material is taking place. Human beings have access to something non-material, which is called consciousness. It's a dual object. It's a dual object to the material world. Here's the material world. An observer is also a consciousness world, and it's that observer's consciousness to which observer has access. It's that consciousness which is choosing out of all this potentiality, all these possibilities, the one actuality that is happening, the one Geiger counter where the measurement is taking place. Okay? So what is this consciousness now? It's a world which is connected to the observer also. The observer is part of the material world, the observer is also part of this world of consciousness, right? Somehow this is the thing. But this consciousness is separate from the material world.
Then how do you define consciousness? How do you define consciousness?
That's a problem too. How do you define consciousness? So we define, the attempt was made by von Neumann to define as a separate world. Separate world of consciousness acts on the material world, and that action is what we call choosing from potentiality.
So material world doesn't have consciousness?
That's what we just defining it. That is, this is the world. Consciousness as a separate world.
So consciousness is connected to living beings?
Consciousness is defined as that world which, by acting on the material world, makes potentiality into actuality. Take it as a definition. This is what von Neumann is defining. It's the world, different world of consciousness, which by interacting with this material world, makes potentiality into actuality. And that is what we call choice. Consciousness choosing.
So consciousness exists where? Where it exists?
That's the point. It's a different world. Non-material consciousness from a different world. Okay?
Does the Artha has got consciousness?
That's the definition. We are defining this world of consciousness.
Does I have consciousness?
Yeah.
Does the Artha have consciousness?
You have consciousness, and your consciousness is acting on the electron,
Okay.
and choosing the electron state to be in that particular position where the Geiger counter is
Okay.
thinking.
Does the Artha and Sun has got consciousness?
That's it. That's my attempt.
Earth, Mother Earth. This Earth, planet Earth has got consciousness.
Yeah, Earth.
What has consciousness?
The Earth. He's telling the Earth.
Planet Earth. Does the planet Earth have anything called
Does the
consciousness?
planet Earth has consciousness? Why do you bring in the Earth right now? Earth is not measuring, you are measuring, you are involved in the measurement. So you can get in, but not Earth as of yet.
So consciousness is there everywhere.
No, because von Neumann is not saying that. Von Neumann is saying that you have consciousness.
So
You are the measurement
So
person,
living
right?
beings has got consciousness. Non-living
Yeah, yeah.
things.
No, we were digging in all, look, the more sidetracking you do, these are important questions, I agree. But please stay with the object of the exercise that we are doing.
No, I'm asking.
Object of the exercise
Yes.
is this. We have a Geiger counter, we have an electron in potentiality, we have a Geiger counter in potentiality, we also have an observer.
No, I am asking straight one. So consciousness, where it exists, what is the nature of consciousness?
I
That's all.
understand what you're saying. I am saying that what von Neumann is saying, that's all I am saying. I am saying that the consciousness resides in the observer. Okay?
Observer.
This is also, it turns out that this will also be a mistake, but please stay with it, otherwise we'll never get to the bottom of
Let
it.
him continue with the later on.
Right now, I'm not telling you the truth, as quantum physics allows us to discover, but I'm taking you through all the misconceptions so that you will arrive at the truth unambiguously, without any opinion, but simply as the logical consequence of quantum physics.
Amen.
The exercise, if you take all kinds of sidetracking, is the Earth conscious, is this conscious, is that? No, I'm not talking about that. Question is, it's the observer. It's the observer, I'm calling it conscious. You are something that is non-material as well. Yes, you have a material body, but the observership that you have comes from an entity that you have called consciousness. And it is that entity, non-material entity, which is doing the choosing, via which potentiality is become actuality. Stay with it and agree with me, otherwise I cannot proceed.
I had a request for the audience, and that is that I think we should allow you to go continuously.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, at least for an hour and a half at a time.
That won't work either, because I want a certain amount of engagement, but I don't want if the engagement goes too far because you decide to be obtuse, I don't want that to interrupt the flow of other people, because everybody's interest has to be seen.
No, it was told that interruption is, see,
So the question is that that's too much of a leeway for our Indian audience, to be honest, because people keep interrupting him in that spirit and we not get lost. So we have to differentiate between clarificatory questions and points of view.
Okay, I stop
Yeah.
now.
So we can ask clarificatory questions, is my request, only relative to what he's speaking about right now. Yeah? And then we'll move forward and we have plenty of time.
Okay, any point at time, if you have enough patience and time, then only I'll ask question. So patience comes from consciousness.
Yeah, we will get into your questions at some point.
Yes, see, if there is no patience, it is no quantum mechanics.
If questions are not asked, there is no quantum mechanics and there is no teaching. So absolutely, you legitimate.
And Madam told, that's why I am asking.
Question is legitimate. Question is legitimate.
Dr. Giridhar and everybody else, I just have a request, as Dr. Tony also said. The thing that we are talking here is about something which we never dwelled in this level of dwelling in the realm of quantum physics. We never ever, we understood, we heard, we thought we understood, we went ahead in life. But here is a moment in time, we just have to keep aside all that we know, and given that he's just throwing certain probabilities and actualization and a possibility which is quantum. So all that we have to allow is to dwell in it for ourselves, and I'm sure by the end of the third day you will come consciousness, and paradoxically the spirit has consciousness. But that's a different question. My request to you is that all of you just dwell and dwell and dwell. And that's where the probability and possibility arises. Don't make any conclusions, please. Patience, tolerance, and all that stuff. Let's just dwell in it. I opened an open invitation. You're welcome. And also I have a request. Please make a note of all your questions, because we're going to have a panel discussion, open discussions. All your questions will be to whatever possible from the quantum probabilities will be answered. Okay? So make a question.
What is consciousness? Just give the observer another name. No question that an observer's looking is important. Correct? Everybody accepts. Geiger counter could not do it. It's just potentiality. Next step, observer. Can the observer do it? Now observer is consciousness, is not totally objectionable. We are all observers. We know that we have consciousness, right? This is not objectionable. Who can object? Whether the act has consciousness can wait. But observer has consciousness, why object? We are observers and we are consciousness. No question about it, right? So we agree with von Neumann to this extent. Now what is the nature of consciousness that von Neumann proposed? And this is the same, this is the way that we think of consciousness from time immemorial. This is nothing new. That consciousness is a dual world. In India, that thinking is called what? Sankhya. Consciousness and matter are two separate worlds. This is the way it is. Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti is material world, Purusha is consciousness. Purusha acts on Prakriti, and that's how it is out. Isn't that Sankhya?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so von Neumann is pure Sankhya. It's called dualism in the West. What's the problem with dualism that the scientists have? Scientists have a very simple problem with dualism. Very difficult at the same time to answer. Scientist goes back to that model of signal. Scientist says that any kind of action from world, another world to this world, or another object to this object, any kind of action, any kind of communication takes a signal. Where is the signal with which this Purusha interacts with Prakriti, or if you will, in Western language, God interacts with the world? Because indeed Christians propose that it's true. They call it downward causation. God, name of consciousness, here is the world, God acts on the world, downward causation, and that's how the world happens. That's called a dualistic model of things. We call it Sankhya in India. Westerners call it mind-body dualism. Mind acts on the body to make reality. Okay? But scientists say, where is the signal? All interactions require signal. That's the prejudice at that time. Okay? This is like 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. We are still arguing. Von Neumann proposed something, but that got bogged down into dualism. How does consciousness interact with matter? Because where is the signal? Where is the mediator? These are questions that you cannot answer. In those days, you could not answer. Remember the experiment that I referred to happened in 1982. Signal-less communication was not discovered yet. Okay? So this is very legitimate. This is also legitimate from another point of view too. Because you have to face up with the fact that if the world is separate from us, does that really even do the job? A separate God. does that even do the job of integrating science and spirituality? Dualism has never been very satisfactory. Why? Because ultimately we are locked into a very specific, interesting proposition. If there is an entity, I know there are many of you who will be very sympathetic to this dualistic position, because it feels like we can pray to this God and then maybe God will play favoritism and all that. But fundamentally, it makes us into little machines, doesn't it? Now the machines can do praying or machines cannot do praying. So those ignorant machines who don't know how to pray, they suffer. But the machines who know how to pray, they will be favorites of God and therefore they will suffer. This is how dualists feel. I'm being very crude and I'm joking. But please don't be offended by it. But that's what you do, isn't it? And when some dualists say that, look, all you have to do is to pray to God and God will give you stuff, the abilities that other people don't have. You'll be the favorite. Jews do that. Hindus do that, Muslims do that, Christians do that. Everybody is just trying to find favoritism with God. That's what we call religion. Religion is to, if you follow this religion, you'll be God's favorite. Isn't that the way we play the game? If you play the game that way, ultimately it does not satisfy. The modern mind has learned this one thing, that if you don't do it, it doesn't happen. If you don't do it, this is what this lady here, Ilma, will teach, that you have to play a role in it. You have to be happy. If you don't become happy, no other agency can make you happy. It don't happen. With prayer, that may help you to come down, that there is somebody else who will make me happy. But reality has to happen in you. That is the truth. You cannot deny it. So in this way, we are learning. We are learning that ultimately it's us. So gradually detach from that dualism, not only because of the scientific difficulty, but because integration with dualism is not complete. It leaves some gaps of deep dissatisfaction with it. This is why we quit on religions. Because their interpretation of what is taking place, how reality is made, is always looking at this agency of downward causation or this outwardly force, non-material force, whatever you call it, or even choice of consciousness. Even that name you can give, but if the choice is outside of us, it ultimately does not give us neither the creativity nor the responsibility for making these choices. And do we want to live in such a world where there is this arbitrariness that unless we are favorite, it's not going to happen? What should the unfavorite do? Then all we do is we become terrorists and kill off the unfavorite. We call them hidden, we call them kafir, we call them bad people, and we just kill them because they don't deserve to exist in the world. They're not God's favorite. God doesn't want them to exist anyway, right? Do we want to create such a world? No, we don't. This is the reason it is very important to recognize and sympathize with the scientists that they were objecting to dualism. Dualism is not good for our mental health. It really isn't. As soon as we separate that this is good and this is bad, this is the favorite and this is not favorite, immediately we revolt against ourselves. We're not really valuing what needs to be valued. Namely that there is something for which we need to take responsibility and we need to take charge. We need to realize that no, we choose. It's not some agency separate from us. Okay? This change from a dual agent to us being the agent is extremely important. This is the real change that is taking place in the movement that is taking place now. This is the crucial point of the new paradigm. Please stay with it. It's not somebody else. Because if it is somebody else, we always defer to responsibility, just as the scientific materialist does. Scientific materialists say, well, it's all happening because we are badly conditioned. Evolution has given us this brain circuits and there's no way to avoid it. There will always be war, there will always be violence, and therefore we must police them, control them in order to make it livable. You know, this is why America maintains a huge army and wants to be a policeman of the world and all that stuff. Is there another way of looking at it? Yes, there is. We start taking the responsibility for it because we create the mayhem, and then we are responsible, and we can correct it. That's the way to look at it, and that's the world that we are building. That's what we want to build. Our question is that is this legit? Is this the way the reality is built? We have to make sure, because many times you have tried to do this and it fails, because you are not doing it in accordance to the building, the way that the world is, the way the reality is. As far as we can ascertain this is reality because you are getting experimental support from quantum physics. Okay? So we got to move beyond dualism, although I agree that if you want to really synthesize with dualism, nobody can make you into a monist, into a quantum activist. However much quantum physics is guided by experimental data and so forth. Because it is true, fundamentally, that reality is the way it is. Why should reality depend on science? No, it does not have to. You know, Christians often write to me, no, we know Christ consciousness, you are just not recognizing it. Christ consciousness is special, it's a person. Similarly, the Hare Krishnas write to me and they say, well, you are just a scientist who have this attachment to the idea of impersonal. But reality is personal, got to be, it's Krishna. No difference, you call it Krishna, call it Christ, but you do the same thing. You are trying to create a lack of responsibility. Okay, bhakti is wonderful, you know, but there are other ways to look at bhakti and love and so forth. One does not have to be a dualist. One does not have to avoid responsibility. This is what I'm saying. Give me a hearing. You know, after the 4 days, you are free. You can choose. But for these 4 days, we'll stay with the premise that can we build a monistic way of looking at it, take responsibility, we have freedom, we choose, it's us, and see if that resonates with us or not. If it doesn't after the 4 days, you give up and you live your own way. But right now the rule is suspend your disbelief and stay with it. Just like Rita said, stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. See what happens. Okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Good. So the next step. Next step will be very, very systematic. So let's look at the paradox of quantum measurement as the materialist sees it. Materialist is not satisfied with dualism, I already mentioned, because where is this signal? They don't know about us-phase experiment yet. But look at the inconsistency of materialism. That too is very inconsistent, and this is important to see. Materialists are creating problem for dualism, looking at consciousness, like the religions do. That's all the knowledge studies right now, at that time, for materialists. But their model of consciousness is what? Their model is consciousness that the brain is consciousness. You say, where does consciousness decide? For the materialist, decide in the brain, this 3-pound universe. That's what consciousness is, right? So is the brain model of consciousness correct? And very important for materialists themselves to see that there is a paradox there too. What is our model of the brain? Elementary particles make atoms, make molecules, make neurons, make the brain, and then you have consciousness, right? Brain is consciousness. But is that the quantum model description of the brain? What does the quantum physics say about it? Quantum physics describes this as potentialities of elementary particles, possible elementary particles, make possible atoms, make possible neurons, make possible brain, and possible brain makes possible consciousness. So possible consciousness looks at possible electrons and asks, what happens? What can happen when possibility couples to possibility? I always joke, think about all kinds of possible money in the bank, think all kinds of possible cars, and see if ever a real car will manifest in your garage. Try it. Lots of people tried it in the 70s when we said we create our own reality. Okay, we have a brain, so we think, and people thought indeed, people meditated even. People said, well, if we do it with pure heart, pure meditation, oh God, give me a Cadillac, oh God, give me a Volkswagen, oh God, give me a Volkswagen. Nothing happened. You change the name of the car to BMW, nothing happened. Some people even tried to create parking space in downtown Bangalore. You know, it's very hard. In Commercial Street, you cannot find the parking space. So could we manifest parking spaces? No, not really. Every once in a while, yes, but not really. So people did all kinds of funny things. So long as you think that you are consciousness and therefore you can do specific things. Because you are looking at yourself still, that consciousness choosing in that kind of way as individual consciousness. And so long as you are doing that individual consciousness, you cannot quite do it. So this way of looking at this possibility coupled to possibility, you cannot do it. Can we do it as the individual consciousness? Let's look at that a little. I thought I had a try about this particular one. Okay, that's I have to go before, but it's worthwhile doing it. So, here, okay? And two choices, one is red, one is green. Okay? One observer is approaching it from this direction, another observer is approaching from this direction. Bangalore, imagine you are driving on MG Road. There's a red light, right? And you want what? Green. Don't tell me that you will be fine with red. No Bangalorean is fine with red. Or if you live in Delhi, no Delhiite is fine with red. Everybody wants green all the time. But your friend who is approaching the street line from the other direction, who can blame him or her also to want green? Right? So she wants green, you want green, what happens? Collision, right? Patrimony. So the question arose that if we individually could choose what we need to make the reality to be, and that conflicts with another person's choice, what then? See the problem? We could choose our Cadillac, but another person wants that Cadillac too. Now what do we do? Who gets it? Now the spiritual, the religious people have an answer. We are the favored one. We're Christian. We have surrendered to Jesus. Or if we are Mohammedan, we surrender to Muhammad. Or we surrender to Buddha. Or we surrender to Yajnavalkya. Okay, so you get your wish because you have surrendered to your particular God. That's one way of resolving. Does it satisfy you? There's another way. Another way can be best illustrated by a story. So in this story, a woman, this story got to be about Hollywood, like the nature of this story. So in Hollywood, there is this woman was walking the street on Sunset Boulevard, beautiful street, and encountered another friend. I haven't met her in a long time. She says, oh, let's catch up with us. Catch up with each other. Let's go to a coffee house. So they find a coffee house and they're having coffee, and this friend starts talking about herself, and goes on and on and on and on. After about half an hour, she becomes very aware that she's talking about herself all this time, and she becomes a little embarrassed. Oh, look at me, I'm talking about myself all this time. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? So that's another way. This is called solipsism. I am the only reality, and you are real because you are my friend. If you're not my friend, bye-bye. You're not reality. But that again is a false philosophy. You are not the only conscious person in the world. You'd like to be, but it's not that way. It's just not that way, because somebody else has the same one thing, and again conflict will arise. So the summary of all this kind of thinking is simply this. And this is where you have to admire the physicist. There was an actual physicist, Eugene Wigner, who raised this paradox. This is called paradox of Wigner's friend.